Okay, section 5.4. Section 5.4, the problems that we're going to be working are going to be dealing with the difference quotient. So the difference quotient is f of x plus h minus f of x all over h. So that's the difference quotient that you're going to be using for all 5 problems in this section. Okay, let's look at problem number 1. It says, for the function f of x equals 2x minus 9, construct and simplify the difference quotient, which means we're going to be putting this function into the difference quotient. So the first part of this difference quotient is f of x plus h, which means I'm going to go to this function, and wherever I see an x, I'm going to put an x plus h. So let's look what that looks like. So I have 2. Now instead of x, I put x plus h. So I've replaced the x with x plus h minus 9. So that took care of the f of x plus h. Now I'll do minus whatever the f of x, whatever the function is. Well, f of x is 2x minus 9. So I'm going to put that in parentheses because I want to make sure that I am subtracting the whole function and not just part of it, because I'm subtracting minus this whole function. Now, in a minute, on the last step, I know that the denominator is h, but we're going to worry about that in a minute. Let's clean this up right here. Here, I will distribute the 2. So 2 times x gives me 2x, plus 2 times h gives me 2h. Bring down the minus 9. Now, on this side, I will distribute that negative to both of those, so that'll make that a negative 2x. And since it's a negative times a negative, that actually makes that positive 9. Now, if you'll notice, you'll be able to clean this up quite a bit. A lot of this will cancel. Look at this 2x and negative 2x. If you combine like terms, those two terms cancel each other out. And also, the negative 9 and the positive 9 cancel each other out. So the only thing I'm actually left with in the numerator is 2h. Now I'll plug in the denominator, which is just an h. So when you cancel these h's, because you have h over h, your answer is simply 2. Number 2, same thing. This time my function, f of x equals 7x plus 7. So again, I'm going to use this function to construct the difference quotient. Remember, the first part of the difference quotient is f of x plus h, which means go to your function and replace the x with x plus h. So if I do that, I'll have 7, replace the x with x plus h, bring down this plus 7. So there's the first part, which is the f of x plus h part of the difference quotient. Now subtract the whole function. So if I subtract the whole function, I'm going to have minus this right here, 7x plus 7. Okay, now remember, I'm going to clean this up and then put it over the h in the denominator. So here, I'll distribute the 7. 7 times x gives me 7x, plus 7 times h gives me 7h. Drop down this plus 7. Now, distribute the negative to this, so that makes that negative 7x. And it makes this a negative 7. So, once again, when you clean this up, look what is left. The 7x minus 7x cancels. The positive 7 and the negative 7, when you put those together, they cancel each other out. So, all I'm left with is the 7h. So when I put it over the denominator, and the denominator is always just h, the h's cancel out, so your answer is 7. Number 3, this is where these start to get a little more messy, or a little messier. This time the function is f of x equals x squared minus 5. So let's use this and plug this into the difference quotient. Again, let's remember the difference quotient is f of x plus h minus the function all over h. So let's see. The first thing is I go to my function and replace the x with x plus h. So here's my x. So I'll replace it with x plus h. Now it says to square that. Bring down the minus 5. Now minus whatever the function is. So the function here is x squared minus 5. Now here's where it gets a little messy. I have to figure out what x plus h squared is. So let's do this once and then keep it handy for the problems that you have. Anytime you need to have x plus h squared, okay, I'm going to write whatever that is up here, so instead of foiling it out every time, I can just plug in what the answer of this part is. Because x plus h squared means x plus h times x plus h. So let's see, if I FOIL this, x times x gives me x squared, plus, go on the outside here, x times h is hxh or hx, however you want to write it. Now, in the middle, look, this is another x, h, and then the last, h times h, is positive h squared. Now, these two middle terms are like terms, so I have x squared. If I have one, and then I add another one, I actually have two of these terms, so plus 2xh or hx, however you want to write it, plus h squared. So let's look at this and say, okay, now anytime, so I don't have to do this step every single time I see x plus h squared, let's write this somewhere where I can remember it. So I'm just going to write it up here. X squared plus 2xh plus h squared. So here's what I'm going to write every time I need to know what x plus h squared is, so I don't have to do all this. So now, after the x plus h squared, I'll bring down the minus 5. I'll distribute this negative, so it gives me minus x squared. Negative times a negative is positive 5. Now, just like the first two, this is going to clean up a lot. So let's see, this x squared and that negative x squared will cancel each other out. Let's see, I've got a negative 5 and a positive 5 that cancel each other out. So look what I have left. I've got 2x plus h. Oh, excuse me, that's not right. 2xh plus h squared. So that's all I have left once all this canceled out. So I have 2xh plus h squared. Now remember, the denominator is an h. So let's see how we are going to simplify this. Look at both the terms in the top. They both have an h, which means I can actually pull an h out of those terms. If I pull the h out of this first term, I'll have 2x. Plus, if I pull the h out of this term, I'll have just an h with the h in the denominator, which means the h's cancel. So all you're left with is 2x plus h. Okay, number 4. Now remember, I'm going to keep this handy because I see in number 4 I've got another x squared, which means I'm going to have an x plus h squared. So I want to keep this handy so I can skip that step. So let's look at number 4. My function is f of x equals negative 2x squared plus 10x plus 9. So let's evaluate or construct the difference quotient. So remember, the first part of the difference quotient is f of x plus h, which means I'm going to go to this problem, to this function, and wherever I see an x, which is those two spots, I'm going to replace them with x plus h. So let's see what that looks like. I'll have negative 2. Instead of x, I'll write x plus h squared plus 10. Instead of x, I'll write x plus h. Bring down the plus 9. Now remember, the second part of the difference quotient is to subtract this whole function, the minus f of x. So I'm going to have minus, open parentheses, negative 2x squared plus 10x plus 9. Now remember, this is going to clean up quite a bit. Let's bring down this negative 2. Now, here's where you'll be happy that you have that other part handy, because I need to know what x plus h squared is. Remember, we did it in this problem and then simplified it all out. This is why we keep it handy. Anytime you have x plus h squared, this is what you plug in. X squared plus 2xh plus h squared. So that's going to save us quite a bit of time. X squared plus 2xh plus h squared. So that took care of that. Here, I'll distribute this 10. So now I have plus 10x plus 10h. Bring down the plus 9. Distribute this negative to these parentheses. So I'll have negative times a negative, which actually makes it positive. 2x squared. It makes this negative 10x, and it makes this negative 9. Now I have one more thing I need to do before I start cleaning this up by combining like terms. I'll distribute this negative 2 to those parentheses to remove those parentheses. So when I do that, I'll have negative 2x squared. Then I have negative 2 times positive 2xh, which gives me negative 4xh. Negative 2 times positive h squared gives me negative 2h squared. Now, just bring all the rest of this down. Plus 10x plus 10h plus 9 plus 2x squared minus 10x minus 9. Now, let's clean this up by combining like terms. Well, here's a negative 2x squared and a positive 2x squared. So those cancel. Then I have a positive 10x and a negative 10x. So those cancel. And then I've got this positive 9 and negative 9. So those cancel. So once you've done all of that canceling, look at what you're left with. You have negative 4xh minus 2h squared plus 10h. So if you notice, on all these problems, the only terms that don't disappear are the terms that have the h. So that's what's going to be left, which is why the last step when you simplify this is to pull out the h. Okay, so remember, the denominator is the h. All these terms have an h in them, so you'll pull it out, which will leave me with negative 4x. If I took the h out, if I take the h out of this one, I'll just have negative 2h. If I take the h out of this one, I'll have positive 10. Well, when I put it over the h in the bottom, the h's cancel. So you're just left with the negative 4x minus 2h plus 10. All right, the last one. This time my function is f of x equals 7x cubed. So this one's going to get really messy because of that x to the third power. Because remember, the first step of the difference quotient, once again, is f of x plus h, which means I go to the function and replace the x with x plus h. So let's do that now. So I'll have 7 times, replace this x with x plus h to the third power. Okay, now after that, remember you'll have minus f of x, so just minus this function, 7x to the third, and then remember later on we'll put it all over h. Here's where it gets messy. So I'll bring down the 7. Now x plus h to the third power means x plus h times x plus h times x plus h, right? If you're doing it to the third power, that means to multiply it times itself 3 times. Now just bring down this minus 7x to the third. Now we can take a little shortcut because on the previous 2 problems, we do know what this is, right? We did x plus h squared. Remember what that gave us? That gave us, if you'll remember from the last 2 problems, the x plus h squared gives you this. X squared plus 2xh plus h squared. So I can fill that in here. X squared plus 2xh plus h squared. So that did the squared part, which is these 2. I still have this other one, x plus h. And again, drop down the minus 7x cubed. So now, to take care of this part right here, I have got to distribute the x squared to both of those. So x squared times x gives me x to the third. X squared times h gives me plus x squared h. So again, that was x squared times x, which is just x squared h. Now I need to distribute this 2xh to both of these. So let's think about what that means. The first thing I have is 2xh times x, which means my x here is going to end up being squared. So it's just going to give me 2x squared h. Now I've got to distribute this 2xh to this h. So this time when I multiply these, it's the h that's going to end up squared. So let's see, I will have 2x and then the h squared. Okay, then the last part of this is why it's so messy, is to distribute this h squared to both of those. So let's see, I've got h squared times x, which is just h squared x. Then I've got h squared times another h, which that gives me h to the third. So I've taken care of all this. Now just drop down, the 7 is in front of all that from this 7 coming down. Now minus 7x cubed. Now inside these parentheses, remember to be a like term, you have to have the same letter, and those letters have to have the same exponent above them. They do not have to be in the same order though, which means, let's look at this. Here I've got an x squared and an h, which means I'm looking for anything else that has an x squared and an h. But look at this next term. It's got an x squared and an h, which means these 2 terms are like terms. I can put those together. So let's see, let's bring this down. So if I've got 1 here and 2 here, I've actually got 3 of the x squared h's. Now also, look at these. So this has an x and an h squared. This one has an x and an h squared. Like I said, the letters don't have to be in the same order. They just have to have the same letters, and the letters have to have the same exponent, which these 2 terms do. So once again, I've got 2 plus 1 of these terms. So I can write the terms, I can write the letters in any order I want. So I have plus now 3 xh squared. So again, that's just putting those together. Close the parentheses, bring down the minus 7x cubed. So now let's distribute this 7 to remove these parentheses. So let's see what that gives me. 7x cubed plus 21x squared h plus 21xh squared. Bring down the minus, oops, I removed the parentheses. Bring down the minus 7x cubed. So let's see what I have. Oh, I lost something. Ooh, y'all gonna kill me. I forgot to bring down this h cubed. So again, let's go back so I don't have to make this video all over. This x cubed came down. These two terms, these x squared h's, combined, I had 1 here and 2 here, which gave me 3x squared h's. These two terms combine to make 2 plus 1 xh squared, so that gave me 3xh squared. Here's where I forgot to bring this down. That plus h to the third should have gone right there. So when I distributed this 7, it gave me 7x cubed plus 21x squared h plus 21xh squared. Here's where I missed it because I forgot to bring down that h cubed. 7 times h cubed gives me plus 7h cubed. So this right here needs to be a 7h cubed minus, drop this down. Now if you'll notice, the 7x cubed and the negative 7x cubed are what cancel each other out. So let's look at what we have left. I've got 21x squared h plus 21xh squared plus, right here, that's 7h to the third. Now, remember, all of your terms have an h. Those are what don't cancel out. So since that's all over h, I can pull the h out of this numerator. So they're all going to lose an h. So let's see what happens there. I have 21x squared. I pulled out the h. Plus 21x. If I pull an h out of here, I still have an h. Plus 7. If I pull an h out of here, I still have h squared. Again, all over h. So let's see what is left since those h's cancel. I have 21x squared plus 21xh plus 7h squared.